Tech9, something else.
Hi everyone, Anthony Fantano here, internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for a review of the new Tech9 album, Something Else. Tech9, Kansas City rapper, been at rap music for a few decades now, and if you're the kind of person that analyzes rap music as a game, as an industry, and I know there are a lot of people who do, Tech9 is a pretty interesting figure. Since the late 90s and early 2000s, he's been making hardcore hip-hop with a slight horrorcore edge, and his alternative lyrical topics and his alternative style and get up when he would do live shows or take promo pictures sort of set him in this outcast light. And a lot of this guy's old outfits and get-ups when he would perform live actually had him looking a lot like hip-hop's answer to nu metal, which is not that far of a comparison when you consider the fact that System of a Down Serj Tankian is actually one of the vocal guests on this album. So there are some nu metal and some rap metal vibes too coming through on Tech9's music in general and this album too. But the fact that he's dabbling in this genre that a lot of people consider to be kind of on the downturn hasn't really affected his popularity. And the fact that he is an older rapper who has been in the underground for a long time hasn't really affected his popularity either, because let's face it, a lot of these older underground rappers didn't really transition over when the underground kind of exploded in the last handful of years. However, it seems that Tech9 has really thrived in this brand new internet age for rap music, and that's something that is rapped about a handful of times here on this album. And yes, Tech9's really eccentric style and image helps, but I feel like the fact that he is a very technical and proficient and fast rapper is maybe his biggest selling point. I love hearing this guy spit in a cypher or doing a freestyle, doing something a cappella. He's just a mind-blowing spitter, has a really great flow. And the thing is, he enunciates really well and comes through with some really blunt lyrics that you get the first time or second time around. Definitely a guy who kind of straddles that line between being accessible and clever. It's this sort of balancing act that has made Tech9 a popular rapper, has brought him success, and as success has come, things with him have changed, especially his feature lists as of late. With his recent albums, Tech9 has featured artists that you would expect a guy like Tech9 to work with. Guys like 3 6 Mafia, or local boys like Chris Calico, or Big Scoob, and also young up-and-comers who have a similarly dark edge to them like Hopsin. But then there are some sort of artists that are either really popular, much more popular than Tech9 in the mainstream, or ones that sort of feel like are outside of his dark realms as well. People like Kendrick Lamar, Danny Brown, who appears on this album, Lil Wayne, Yelawolf, T-Pain, The Game, and Wiz Khalifa are on this album too. Even Big Crit, who Tech9 did a pretty awesome BET cypher with a few years ago. There's even a Legal and Clear Doors sample of Jim Morrison singing all over one of the tracks on this LP. And even though things have been changing for Tech9, stylistically, he's stuck to his guns pretty much. Even though he is a different artist than he used to be in the early 2000s, he's still pretty recognizable as the same guy. I think the biggest surprises on this LP are maybe the clubbier tracks, especially Fizzles, which has Danny Brown on here, one of the bonus tracks from this LP, where of course, it's a banger beat, really noisy, and Tech is rapping about Molly, which I guess is just something you have to do in rap these days, especially if you're rapping with Danny Brown. So even though in a slightly objective way, I can acknowledge that this album has versatility, it has style, Tech9 has technical ability with rapping, quite a bit of it, I don't like it. I don't like this LP. Not even a little bit. You know, I just don't get the sentiment of this album on a lot of tracks, especially right from the start of this LP, where you have these monotone girl voices talking about force, trying to reduce us, I guess us being Tech9 listeners, or those who listen to Tech9 and think alternatively. But what the alternative is never really explicitly said. I just feel like there are all these vague feelings of isolation thrown all over this album. It's almost like the music on this LP is trying to feed like an emotional vulture on anybody who's ever felt like they were unaccepted at any point in their lives. And of course, around every corner on this LP, we're reminded of how nobody accepts Tech N9ne, and he's an outsider, and he's different. There are moments like on the song Bitch, breaking into colored houses, where Tech N9ne comes off really funny, clever, and self-aware, talking about how for a majority of his career, his audience has been predominantly white. However, as he's been getting more popular and accepted into a rap community that is increasingly growing more open-minded toward things like gay rights, as well as darker expressions in hip-hop music. But then there are spots on this LP where I feel like Tech's personal observations aren't that fantastic, or just his personal experiences, which I'm not sure he's putting on display if he's not going to at least twist them in a way that has interesting wordplay or subtlety, like on the song With the BS, which has a pretty great banger beat and some solid guest verses. I love Big Scoob's contribution to this track. The dude raps fast, he's got a fat, smooth, husky voice. But Tech N9ne, he's just completely over the top about his financial troubles and getting his kids through college. He puts it on display in the most obvious way possible, where I don't really feel like anything for the situation, really. Like, okay, you have to put your kids through college. That's okay. It's great that you have kids going to college, which he cleverly rhymes with knowledge. But still, even though there are moments of this track that I do enjoy, the instrumental kind of keeps me back from full enjoyment, I think, because of just the kind of weird Halloween-style synthesizers playing in the background. Not everything needs to sound subtly creepy in a cartoony way, especially college enrollment. I mean, one of my issues instrumentally with Tech N9ne kind of goes back to the song Bitch, where he mentions that he was one of the first rappers to try to make putting classical and opera music sampled into hip-hop big. To me, this trend has consistently been very corny, gaudy, and just in bad taste, which are adjectives I would use to describe other tracks on this LP, like the song Love to Dislike Me, which sounds like this rap metal Evanescence collaboration hybrid with this Korn-esque guitar wail screaming in the background. Again, I feel like these feelings of I don't belong are put on in the most vague way possible, where just about anybody listening can hear this and be like, I identify. It just feels so manipulative to me. It feels so shady. And then there are moments where Tech N9ne doesn't really feel that relatable at all, like on the track Fortune Force Field, which essentially is Tech's personal lyrical diary about the trials and tribulations of attempting to trademark a mixed drink that he rapped about in a previous song. As soon as the first verse was over, I was just thinking, what am I even listening to? Will Tech N9ne be rapping about his stock options later in the track list? I realized that trademarking your own thing and trying to start your own business is a very personal thing. It could lead to a lot of money. It may be really important to Tech N9ne. However, it does not make for a very passionate and harrowing and meaningful song topic, to be completely honest. Maybe this is the kind of thing that Jay-Z could write like a really cocky, clever line about with a double entendre, and then it would sort of fit into a song and get annotated on Rap Genius, but it is just beating a dead horse when you've worked it out into song form. If there's one single thing I can give him props on, at least in regards to this track and others on here, he's topical. He takes a concept and he runs with it, even if it's a concept that is really stretched too far thin by the time he's run out to the length of a full song. I do have to give him props on the song Fragile, though, one of the few tracks on here I really dug, a song where he felt real, he felt like he was passionate, he felt heartfelt on this track, really a song where lyrically he was responding directly to critics of his music. I guess it's kind of ironic that the critic would love the song that kind of is a shot at critics, but hey, it was one of the more captivating tracks on this LP. Am I offended by some of what Tech N9ne said on this song? Not really. I do understand kind of where he's coming from. Being a guy who is an alternative face in hip-hop, he's had a lot of people who don't really understand him or his music listening to it over the years, essentially labeling him as a joke, as a character, as a gimmick, essentially for doing things that have been carried out in rock music for years. Like, you would never write an article about Kiss calling them a gimmick rock band because they wear suits and have face paint. And I feel like he answers these criticisms well in this verse. He ends off the verse by saying, yeah, you know what, I am sensitive about my stuff. He sort of answers the hate, and I like how on the flip side, Kendrick Lamar is on this track, also rapping about critics, rapping about the intense love and some of the hate that he has gotten over the past few years, and how that can kind of drive one crazy as well. Tech-N9ne seems like a cool, down-to-earth dude who is self-aware enough to the point where he shouldn't need to respond to people who are going to just sort of tag him with such a shallow criticism and not really dive deeply into the things that he's saying. However, as far as more serious critics of Tech-N9ne's music go, I don't feel like you can be this guy who gets angry and gets upset saying that you put all this effort into your lines and you're mad that people are criticizing your music when you come out with songs like Dwam! You like Baileys, I like ladies, I'm quite crazy. There are people who are listening closely to lines like this and are like, this line is like not good. It gets a little one-dimensional after a while, especially when I'm hearing lines like, I'm the biggest and baddest, I'm madder than maddest, I got this, I have this.
That's some good rapping, homie.
Thanks. And it just feels like so huge. It feels like this big put on to me. But maybe what's even more disturbing is when Tech-N9ne comes through with a song that feels really personal, like a track That's My Kid, where he comes off like a proud father, and if he has two kids, like he says, that are stable, contributing members of society, that's great. But in this track's lines, he's rapping about using physical discipline, clocking with the right hand so you have a kid who doesn't end up like Adam Lanza? Didn't he have a mental problem? And I think there might be a few serial killers who can attest to being beaten as children. Just saying. And as far as one of the final tracks on this LP, Strange Days, which features Jim Morrison's sampled vocals on the track, while the song isn't terrible, I feel like the sampled Jim Morrison vocals are used so uncreatively, really just singing entire lines of lyrics in between Tech-N9ne's lines, and it just does nothing for me, really. As a matter of fact, most of this album really did nothing for me. While, again, I realize and I respect the fact that Tech-N9ne has technical ability, he has kind of a persona and a style of his own. For me, the choruses, almost zero appeal on this LP, especially that CeeLo hook on That's My Kid, where he sounds half asleep or like in the middle of eating a sandwich or something. And as far as the instrumentals go, very few of them actually appeal to me. Many of them are just far too synthetic, flat, and when they're not just really clubby, they're just gaudy, again, with some of these Halloween-style sounds or musical phrases, or these more classical or operatic musical sounds, phrases, and instrumentation. I'm feeling a strong 3 to a light 4 on this thing. If you've given this LP a listen, what did you think of it? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Why? What do you think I should review next? And that's it. This review is my opinion. If you don't like it, I'm sorry, but here's a straw. I want to give a shout out to Billy Woods, who does not get enough props. All mistakes were intentional. Only the strong subscribe. So do it. Anthony Fantano, Tech-N9ne, something else, different, forever.